Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Max Verstappen, driver of the day at the Spanish Grand Prix for causing the entertainment in some respects of the season so far. Yes, McLaren got a 1-2, but after the late safety car, Max was causing all of the controversy. Instant with Leclerc, instant with Russell, instant with his own race engineer on the radio, and frankly, Max Verstappen versus himself. The drama with Russell after the late safety car has caused mass controversy. So many comments flying left, right, centre about this issue as it stands, and Max getting a penalty that dropped him way down the order, not just in the race, but also in the championship standings. Is this going to be a defining moment of the season to come? Could the penalty have been even worse? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. You are not going to want to miss all the drama, I'm sure, coming out about this over the coming days. Plenty to start with. We will begin and frankly end with this man Max Verstappen. Before we get there, this is Lance Stroll. Well, it's not. It's a tweet about Lance Stroll. If you guys didn't see yesterday, I didn't get a chance to cover it yesterday's video, but Lance Stroll, after qualifying, had such great pain in his wrist that he couldn't race today. There was only 19 cars lining up today. Even Yuki Tsunoda started in the pit lane because if you guys remember before the 2023 season when he fell off his bike or whatever it was, broke his wrist, he did get it fixed and turned up for Bahrain a few days later. Seems like that is in relation to that old procedure that he had back then. And, well, it's clearly frustrating him because, apparently, after qualifying, he lost his temper in the garage and started throwing things around. He walked around the paddock that he had broken things in the garage and had sworn at team members. So either he'd thrown things around and he'd broken his hand as a result or caused himself an injury, or it was a reaction to that he was frustrated that, you know, he knew he had this injury, that he wasn't going to be at a race, and he lost his temper as a result. I don't know. All we do know is that he's getting operated on, I think, tomorrow, and there's a genuine concern because, let's be real, right, he had that operation very close to race day a couple of years ago, and it didn't really go to plan, right? I mean, okay, a couple of years later, he's now got issues. I don't imagine they'll be throwing him straight back into the car for Canada after this operation, so potentially Drogovic could be in the car instead. You know, he could have been in the car this weekend already had Stroll decided that, you know what, racing this weekend wasn't the best idea. Wishing Stroll well, of course, but it's definitely been very controversial for that entire weekend. But we've got plenty of other controversial things to discuss, of course. Yuki Tsunoda, very anonymous today. Part of that was because of yesterday qualifying right at the back of the grid. And Wash even confirms that effectively Red Bull messed this up as far as they are even concerned, saying that we tried something different. We slapped a big rear wing on the car. And, well, you guys can see the Verstappen versus the Tsunoda one, like how spoons out that is. And yeah, Red Bull basically said that was a big mistake on our part, putting that on Yuki's car. Therefore, he qualified really badly. And, well, for the race today, they started with the pit lane in order to deal with that issue. But let's just get into the Grand Prix. The first thing to note is, look at those brand new slick tyres on Piastri, whereas Verstappen right behind was on a scrubbed set. So they tried to start Piastri in a way where he would get some purchase off the line, and that's exactly what happened. Piastri had a monster launch off the line. Lando, to be fair, they dropped their flag really quickly after the 5 lights went on. Lando got a difficult start, and again, Russell was kind of Russell was, you know, putting pressure on again potentially from P4, but Max had a good start, was in the slipstream of Oscar at this point. And again for Lando, frankly, the race was probably lost on the run down to turn 1 for him. Had he got a better launch, had he held off Verstappen, maybe there was a chance. But into turn 1 they go. It was all going on actually because Hamilton had a bad launch, but then in the second phase, because Russell got really boxed in, he had to back off. Hamilton goes around the outside, and this time it's actually Russell not making it work from P4, but Verstappen does. Round the outside of turn 1, takes the position into second place, and all of a sudden he was right on the gearbox of Piastri as well. Russell had a really bad start though. The Mercedes dropped down the order. Leclerc also got through right behind Hamilton immediately, and that would certainly be a conversation topic of the day as well. Hulkenberg going to P10. Watch this space on that one. Of course, Tsunoda starting from the pits. There was a bit of drama because Russell wasn't very happy about the way that the Ferraris were defending, but at this point it was pretty much 2 by 2, apart from Max, who was right in the mix. But it became relatively clear early on that this was not a race that Verstappen would be able to win conventionally. They were going to have to do something different on strategy, which, to be fair, they did. And it, well, created the drama that we had during the Grand Prix. Lots of overtaking, lots of interesting moments. Okay, an inevitable winner on some level, but certainly an interesting race, especially over the final few minutes. So Norris comes and says, we can push push on these tyres, they're up to temperature, want to pass Max, and that's eventually what they, get done. However, the big drama at this point in the race was on Ferrari. Hamilton was struggling with the car. It's interesting with Hamilton because last year, and even the last couple of years at Mercedes, maybe the quali pace wasn't there, but the race pace always would be. This year at Ferrari, occasionally we've seen race pace, occasionally we've seen quali pace, but very rarely both at the same time. And this year it was the same story. Now, to be fair, Leclerc always had the better tyre compounds because he saved it in qualifying, so I think it was inevitable that Leclerc would come through strong in the Grand Prix. But it was fascinating again the way that Ferrari handled this, because Hamilton was clearly so much slower than Leclerc. They clearly had to make the decision to let Leclerc by because, at the end of the day, you might argue there wasn't really a fight on for Leclerc because the podium was always off the cards, which to be fair it was until the late safety car. Even if Hamilton had let Leclerc through immediately, it wouldn't really have mattered in the grand scheme of things. But again, it was a storyline. We saw it in Miami between the two Ferraris. Hamilton was like, look, why are you guys wasting time? I'm on the quicker strategy here. And it was the same story here. Hamilton was, defending. He wasn't defending particularly aggressively, but, he was defending from his teammate because at this point it felt like, it's a battle for position. The front three guys are up ahead, but Leclerc had better pace, but they waited again about 3 laps before they told Leclerc what to do, told Hamilton what to do. Even his engineer was coming on to Leclerc and saying, look, we've got to do lift and coast to keep the tyres in the window. So, again, they just wasted loads of time. Leclerc eventually came on the radio and says, look, if I'm going to sacrifice my quali to be fast in the race, then let's not slow me down, right? I've got the chance to do some damage here. Eventually, Hamilton lets him through, but Leclerc had lost a good couple of seconds of race time at that point. Again, controversy at Ferrari, and, Hamilton's lack of pace today was a big talking point, certainly because of, one of the Saubers. We'll get into it in a second. Max realised at this point in the race, lap 12, that there was really no way that he could fight the McLarens. And again, this was probably frustration number 1 of the day for Max, is that he got a good start, felt like, okay, maybe the win is on, and then Norris sails by on lap 13 with his tyres are falling off a cliff. But to be fair to Max, he then boxed really early, while Fernando Alonso had a bit of an excursion into the gravel and came out absolutely swinging on the soft tyres in the second stint. So Max boxed and made immense progress. He was overtaking people at all corners of the track. Hot track today, great tyre degradation. And that made things pretty entertaining to watch in terms of the overtaking opportunities that were there. Hamilton was on the radio saying, look, why did you box me so early? Because he came into the pits early as well, but he was struggling heavily on the rear of the car. The other drama at this point, actually, was because Hamilton was requesting on the radio, did you make a change to my front wing? Because he had massive understeer. And he says, look, did you take the wing out? And Adami says, no, negative, we didn't do anything. Now, look, to be fair, if Hamilton didn't suggest... I'm not sure what the comms were for Hamilton. Did he say to make a wing change, or did he expect the team to do so based on his comms? I don't know. But Hamilton was expecting anyway a change to his front wing angle that you can make on the pit stops, and then he was told that actually no, we didn't do that. So again, it's just Ferrari things, I suppose. The pace was pretty good, though, at this point for Charles Leclerc, and even Hamilton's second stint was pretty solid as well. I mean, I'm not going to lie, we've got lots of drama today. This was another big incident. This is Liam Lawson getting frisky with Alex Albon. And this happened all race. Lawson into turn 1 was a menace today. Sometimes he was in the right, sometimes he was in the wrong. And Albon and the Williams, the Williams doesn't historically go well around here. They had an awful day today, really. I mean, we had Albon getting damaged a couple of times. This was one of the incidents as well. You can go through all of the incidents and say who was at fault, who wasn't. This one was Lawson's fault. He went way too late down the inside of Behrman, clips Behrman's rear wheel. Behrman has to take to the escape road, and Lawson definitely wasn't getting that position back very easily. And at this point in the race, the big drama at the front was, is Max actually going to 3-stop? Because, he went soft, and then medium on lap 30. And that left him 36 laps to the end on the medium, which seemed very ambitious. Maybe it could have been doable, but Red Bull were certainly trying to put themselves in position to, make this work and put McLaren under some serious pressure. And that's what McLaren realised when Verstappen was making this pass on Leclerc, that actually, the race was very much on at the front of the field, potentially. Now, of course, had Red Bull approached this a different way and the late safety car had happened, then they would have had an extra set of softs to use. But that was not how things eventually turned out. So Verstappen was putting some pressure on the front runners, but it looked at this point on lap 45 or so that probably the McLarens would have him covered, and not much was really happening at this point in the Grand Prix, apart from Hülkenberg running in P9, which was definitely a talking point. We even got Bortoletto swapping positions. Russell had gone for a pit stop onto the soft tyres and was trying to take those until the end, and then we got the pit stops come through. Verstappen came in one lap earlier than Norris, and that actually gave him a big undercut, but it still wasn't quite enough to get anything happening here, especially because Lando eventually got, well, DRS off the back marker, and this is Piastri managing business at the front. Again, I think Piastri did a great job managing everything today. It was just, flawless really from start to finish. Okay, at times Norris looked quicker, then at times Piastri would then respond, and off the line, Piastri just handled things very impressively, and, in such a manner that we needed Max Verstappen to do some craziness in order to make the race interesting. This was another opportunity here. This is Max, this is Lando trying to make their way through traffic, but we had Lawson and Behrman beefing it up big time, and Lawson or Norris therefore got kind of trapped here. Max wasn't very happy either. 2 seconds later, this is Max Verstappen trying to get past Behrman. Obviously, they've got blue flags. Behrman kind of doesn't see him coming, and Max throws his hand up. So this is kind of like strike two. Max was unhappy at first because his car was slow and he wasn't quick enough. The second frustration was this backmarker traffic when he had an opportunity to get Lando. This is not under safety car. Like, he literally throws his arm all the way out the car during a Grand Prix, like during a regular stint. And, looked at this point, Verstappen obviously comes on the radio to say it's effing idiots or whatever, like fuming on the radio. And then the key deciding factor, because at this point the race was pretty much settled, right? Nothing really was going to happen from here until the end, until Andrea Kimi Antonelli rolls off the racetrack. Now, this was another engine failure for Mercedes, which is a really big surprise. And HPP, high performance powertrains, they're going to have to think about it, because back in Monaco, Alonso got an engine failure, and here we are again in pretty toasty conditions, and Antonelli's car just completely gives up on him going into turn 10, and he's off the racetrack and into the gravel. Now that, of course, the car was positioned there, going to be a safety car, which is exactly what it was. So everyone boxed, right? The big debate at the time was whether Max needed to box or not, because Max was on a set of soft tyres that were like 8 or 9 laps old. If he'd have stayed out, he would have started first, right? Because the other guys would have pitted behind him. So Max would have been starting P1 on tyres about 8 laps older than the guys behind. Let's be honest, he wouldn't have held them back, right? The McLarens would have got him. But look, it's Max at the end. You never know what he's capable of managing, right? His defense is very strong. So look, I think there's a chance that if Max was left out there, he might have still been able to hold on for a podium. I don't think it was possible, and Red Bull clearly didn't think so. But the other point was that they only had a set of hard tyres. Nobody ran the hard tyre today, but this was literally the only set of tyre that they had left if they wanted to box him. So the option were keep him out or box for a set of hards. They elected to box him for a set of hards. Of course, Max wasn't very happy about it because he was like, hang on a second, what is this tyre I've got on? Like, why are we on a hard? And he was told that, look, this is literally the only option that you guys have available until the end of the race. Now, it took several laps to get everything cleared up, to let the back markers through and everything, so we could have maybe had another couple of racing laps here, but, I guess they want to be safe and all this. There's a bit of a moment here at the end where Piastri slowed down heavily going into the final sector, caught Norris off guard, nearly caught Max off guard. I mean, I don't know if this was like another frustrating point to add on to Max's frustrations, because, now he's frustrated about being slow at the start of the race. He's frustrated about Behrman getting in the way backmarker traffic. He's frustrated about getting put on the hard tyres. He's frustrated at, Piastri and Norris slowing down in front of him, potentially messing up his preparation for the lap. He nearly did a bit of a lock-up here, which is, of course, not ideal. The race then gets back underway, and this is Max Verstappen very nearly spinning it out into the wall on the right-hand side, because look, those hard tyres are not a particularly grippy tyre. And here he was on the final run to the end of the Grand Prix having a huge moment. I mean, he nearly lost the car here a couple of times. Honestly, an unbelievable job to save it, to be honest. And Lando had a bit of a go at Piastri, but it never really came to anything. But Max nearly lost the car on the hards. The restart was always going to be an absolute nightmare. And this was Leclerc and Verstappen then making contact down the straight. Now, Max was not happy about this at all, because as far as he feels, Leclerc pulled over to the left-hand side and touched him, which he kind of did, but also Leclerc said after the race that, well, Max was trying to push him over to the right-hand side onto the marbles. So, Leclerc wasn't having any of that. He was slowly moving to the left-hand side, and to be fair, Leclerc is ahead here, and there's tons of room for Max to go into, so I don't really think Max can complain about too much there. But that was another piece of frustration. And then at turn 1, it was Russell who gave him a good go on the inside. So Russell effectively did a Lawson here. And this move, he sent it down the inside into turn 1. As far as I'm concerned, This, I think, was too much from Russell. I've not seen the replay in great detail to argue whether it's front wheel alongside wing mirror and all of this, like the technicalities of it. But Russell needs to be at least significantly alongside, as in front wheel to wing mirror, going into and at the apex of the corner. I don't know if he was going into the corner. My perspective is, I think Rosberg's perspective was as well on comms, that this from George was a bit too much. And, because Russell went in deep and made contact here, right? He made a collision happen and Verstappen has to go off the track. So as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Verstappen was concerned, Max was well within his rights to hold on to that place. So yes, Max loses the place to Leclerc, but he, seems to hold on against Russell. At least that was my opinion, certainly was Max's opinion at the time. Max then wasn't very happy that Leclerc and then George, as far as he's concerned, had both rammed him during the race. He wanted a penalty for both of those guys. So then, with all of this frustration that we've discussed over the last few minutes boiling to an absolute boiling point, we then get GP comes on the radio to Max and says, you need to let George through. We think, and presumably Red Bull looked at it and they thought that it was a bit too risky to allow him to stay ahead. Even if Red Bull thought it was 50-50, the argument might be, okay, let's say we tell Max to stay ahead, and to be fair, George could have even overtaken him anyway, if not for this incident and the damage and all the drama that happened as a result, because, George was on a new set of tyres. It was going to be a really difficult challenge for him to even hold on. But the drama happened regardless. So Red Bull might have thought, well, it's better to end up P5 than it is to end up out of the points. If, let's say, you get a penalty for staying ahead and leaving track and getting an advantage, and then you end up way out of the points, the argument might be, okay, even if Red Bull think it's 50-50, they might well think, well, it's just better on the balance of probabilities to tell Max to let him back through. Now, this is where Max loses his head. And this is the thing with Max Verstappen, right? Like, we know that he has a tendency to do this. Every year there'll be at least one Grand Prix where this happens. Certainly when he's in a car that isn't the fastest. But this was outrageous. I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes when I watched this, because it looked like Max was going to pull to the left-hand side, which he did, and let George through for free. George then, of course, snaps up the opportunity, and then 2 seconds later finds that Max Verstappen is driving into his side pod. And this was what it looked like from George Russell's onboard. He just effectively gets shoved off the road. And this is how it looks like from Russell's POV as well. So, here's Russell coming up the back of Max, and Max, pulls the left-hand side, lets him through. Russell scoots around the outside, looks like he's going to be given the place back. And then all of a sudden, you see on the left-hand side this absolute diving figure of, you guys can just about see it here, I suppose, so it's fully on the screen. Verstappen just dives in, makes contact with George, causes some damage, and takes the position back. I mean, there's no other way to describe this than just like, deliberate, like Max is making a point, right? Like, he was making a point to George, and it seemed like he was making a point to his own team as well, to say, do not you dare. That doesn't make sense, but tell me what to do. I will choose at my own discretion whether I give this place back to George or not. And look, this is generational Max Verstappen head loss, right? Like, this is sometimes how it goes. Russell was on the ready being like, what was that about? And look, whatever you think about Max, again, this is one of those instances, like Mexico last year, just way, way over the line. Look, what Russell did to him was maybe unfair turn one, but, I mean, allowing Russell to pass, to just deliberately then slam into him to take the position back and deliberately cause a collision, is just so outrageous that in many in many interpretations of the rules, I would have expected, Nico Rosberg even said it on comms, that he thinks Max should have got a black flag here. Like, he thinks that potentially Max should have been disqualified for this incident. And, of course, that's not what happens. He got a penalty which, many would argue is actually rather lenient. I mean, Vettel and Hamilton a couple of years ago at Baku, that was a 10-second stop and go for deliberately causing a collision, which is 10 seconds plus 30 seconds if you don't take the stop and go and you just finish the Grand Prix. In this case, Max simply received a 10-second penalty, which feels to me very lenient, really, given what we saw today. I understand Max's frustrations, but there's really no one else in the sport that does this and frankly brings the entertainment like Max Verstappen does on a race that Piastri was destined to win. But also, we see Max Verstappen lose his head sometimes and make decisions like as in Mexico last year, where, he just sent it off the track, got loads of penalties. But he hurt Norris's championship challenge that race, and therefore it was actually beneficial for him. Today, this was not beneficial for him. If he'd have just slotted into fifth and accepted the fact that it was a tough day at the office, but at least come back stronger, Max lost loads of points today in the championship battle by finishing where he did. Piastri rolls over the line to win the Grand Prix. The other big talking point of the end of the race, of course, though, was Nico Hülkenberg getting past Hamilton on the final couple of laps. Hamilton said that after the new softer bolted on, he just had, like, the car was vibrating terribly and it didn't feel good at all. Such an interesting race for Hamilton because he was quite anonymous, but his second stint was actually really quite strong compared to Leclerc. And then at the end of the race, the pace just went away from him yet again, and he was overtaken by a Sauber for position at the end of the Grand Prix. Sauber, since the new technical directive and over the last few rounds, they've made some serious progress. It's actually a really cool story to look at. But yeah, I mean, Hamilton, like a Ferrari finishing behind a Sauber, Ferrari powered, is just horrific. And Hülkenberg P5. I mean, look, who knows? If a couple of the guys ahead of him get disqualified for some unbeknown reason, Hülkenberg could have a podium, right? But look, I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately, probably ever. But Max eventually drops down to P10. Alonso gets a couple of points. Great to see him get on the board after a tricky day. Hadjar in P7, Gasly P8, but yeah, Verstappen still puts a point on the board. I mean, look, I don't think it's going to happen, but if Max wins this championship by 1 point at the end of the season, you'll know where the drama might be in terms of what that penalty could and should have been today. But Piastri now leads the championship again by 10 points. Clinical work from him today, had the measure of Norris all weekend long. Verstappen is now substantially behind the championship lead, and, you know, today could be considered on some respects the weekends where the championship went away from Max. Max on the radio after getting told about the penalty just came on and said, look, yeah, copy that, I guess. I mean, yeah, what a day. Max, I mean, as soon as he'd done it, Max must have thought, like, what was I thinking on some level? But look, this is, if McLarens are going to want to every weekend, then Max Verstappen provides the entertainment. There is no doubt about that. We haven't really heard anything from Max yet because I believe that he's not being so keen to talk to the media after this race, and maybe you can understand exactly why. Although Russell does say, I don't know what was going through Max's head in that moment. He actually said a few interesting things, Russell. This is one of them where he goes, I think he forgot that it was a real F1 race and not iRacing or something. And yeah, he went on to make some interesting comments and saying things such as this: Max is such an amazing driver. So many people look up to him. It's such a shame that something like this continues to occur. Totally unnecessary. Never seems to benefit himself. And effectively admitting, as far as he's concerned, that yeah, Max crashed into him. And who did it help? Certainly not Max. In this quote from Max here, that maybe a couple of filtering through at the moment. But yeah, Max responds to the issue and says, the George Russell moment, does it matter? I prefer to speak about the race than one single moment. Of course, it kind of does matter, but it kind of proves that Max Verstappen would probably not like to talk all that much about it, although I'm sure George Russell certainly would. Lando Norris says that, yeah, sure, I've done a move like that, but in Mario Kart, barely ever, if ever in real life. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.